Let's talk about colors and materials inside Ventuz. To do this, like always, we change to a new scene and we simply change our layout to our logic layout, okay? You can find all the color and material nodes in the toolbox under the color and material category. And then we have here that first four nodes, the material node, the alpha node, the color node, and the color solid node. So let's start with the first material node, right? Let's put them here so that we can see something. We also need to put a geometry behind, and let's also add an axis in front to make that a bit larger, and that we also can maybe rotate it, just that we see how the different materials and colors basically affect our geometry, our cube, right? So let's also bevel it a little bit. Okay, let's go now into our material node. As you can see here in our material node, we have here the material name or the node name basically. Then we have here, we can change between a material and a property, right? So property, if you want to use a texture loader or some other color input from another node, which we will also cover very soon, then you can also change that here to property, or you simply click here and you see now we have here a material provider node exposed or extracted from our material, right? So if we delete this and we go inside our material, then we can see this material is now looks a bit different. So if we want to get it back to default, we simply click here material and we say I want to have a material here. But now it still looks different like once we drag and dropped it in first, right? Because we don't have any material or lightning or alpha properties set up basically, okay? So to do that, to get back to that standard material, right, what we have here, you simply click here to the lightning model and you say here, I want to have a base color, right? And as you can see now we have the same setup in that material node like we had before. Now we can go on here. If we open up that base color, right, then you can see we have here access to our base color. If you click here, then we simply can change the colors here, right, with that color wheel or color picker. And of course, you also have access here to the opacity, yeah, to the transparency, basically. Another thing what you also can do in the material nodes, you also can add a material stage to add or layer materials like textures, like roughness maps, like normal maps over each other, okay? So let's talk about the next node. So this was the standard material node. Let me select it and delete it. And let's use now an alpha node here in front. So if we put that alpha node in front of our cube and we check out again our properties, we can see that alpha node is as well a material, just with some different setups. As you can see, we also use here the material, but we don't have a lightning model. The lightning model is in the alpha node by default on inherit, but the alpha property is basically here set from inherit to alpha, right? So this is the only change, and what we can do here now is simply yeah, basically affect our transparency or the opacity of our geometry, right, or of all the geometries behind this alpha node, right? So let's delete this again. So let's use now a color node. So if we put that color node in front, maybe you see already that this looks very similar like our material node we used at the first time, right? So let's double check that. So I also drag and drop in a material node here under, right? And let's call that this here is our color node. And this here is our material node, right? And as you can see, if I select my color node, we have here exactly the same settings like if I select my material node. Yes, you may say, hey, it's not exactly the same, but if I open up that base color, right, then it's exactly the same. So if I switch now between the color and the material node, then you can see it's basically exactly the same node. Yeah, so what Ventuz is basically doing, they are pre-configured this for nodes for us or for you, for us users, so that we simply have a pre-configured material node. If we say I don't want to have a light affecting my geometry, which actually will happen if we use here now that next node, which will be that color solid node. So let's delete these two nodes and drag and drop in that color solid node. And as you can see, now our cube looks very flat. It's not affected by light, right? It's just flat white everywhere, and that's because we are talking about a solid color, right? And a solid color in Ventuz is not affected by light, or at least the geometry is not affected by light if we put that solid color in front. So let's check also here our settings. So you can see here in our standard properties under the light settings, right? We have now selected the no light. If I bring that back to base color, then you can see then we basically have again a material node, right? So if we change that here to no light, we have again our solid color node, right? So then let's check out more lightning options here, what we have here, right? So we also have here some lightning models like Gouraud, right? So if we choose that lightning model Gouraud, then we have access here to a base color, right? Which is really our base color. We can set up our emissive color, right? If you really want to emit light out of that cube, by default, it should be black or out of this geometry. We also have access to the opacity, and we also have access to the ambient color, right? So let's check out the other one. Then we have the Phong lightning model, right? So if we choose that, then you can see we have one more option like that specular, right? So if we change that, you can see with that specular we can nicely define that reflections on geometries, right? Which, yeah, by default is white, which makes sense. But if you want to have it a little bit more yellowish, or even a total different color, right, like bluish, then you also can set this up if you want so. As well, we have access here to the sharpness and to the roughness. Exactly. So let's talk about the materials node in common, or what they have in common. As I told you before already, so these four nodes, the material, the alpha, the color, and the color solid, it's basically all the same nodes, just with different pre-configurations from Ventuz side. Okay, so let's say now I want to have a very fresh material node, so I simply put that material here, right? And now let's see. So the material has the base color. It's affected by light. We can also change it to these different lightning models if we want, like Phong or Gouraud. Let's keep it for base color right now. And then we also can set up some material stages, right? Right down here, you can click that little plus button, and then you can add basically a texture, right? So if we select that plus button, you get a large drop down list where we have from top to bottom, we have textures, normal maps, UV distorts, displacement maps, and so on. Many different options. We don't go through all of them, we just go through the basics. If you want to add your own texture here, you simply choose a texture and you say default, right? Then Ventus will add that texture down here. And you also, if you select that, you also can add more, right? For example, if you want to have a normal map, you're also able to add that here. And as you can see, now we added that normal map. So the cube has already now that default normal map from Ventuz applied, right? If we select this texture, we have access down here to all the properties of this material stage. If we select this material stage, then we have access to all the properties of this material stage, right? So let's delete now this normal map because we don't want it for this explanation. So let's talk about here. Here you also can change now that material stage, right? And you also can change the texture here, right? So if we go also from the loader, you can see we can find a lot of in-engine textures already, like this circle with the alpha, right? If we apply that to our cube, you can see that's working out already. Then we can change it maybe here to that triangle, or you even can add here some normal map as a texture onto that cube, right? What we also can do, we also can change to a texture property. Texture properties are very useful if you want to run movies on geometries or rectangles like here, right? We can choose here from a movie clip, from a movie frame, from a movie stream. We can bring in here some live video. We can load some gradient texture or some texture loader, a SVG file, and some other like NDI special texture properties, right? So let's use now maybe our live video node, right? And by default, he will directly snap to my webcam, which is over there. So as you can see, now we have my live picture here on this cube, right? So if I rotate this, it's all good. And of course, we get affected by light, right? So this is okay if we are using a movie or a live input, right, on a 3D model, maybe then it would be okay. But let's say you don't want to have this cube is affected by light because you want to have a very clear picture and the real colors of that live stream from my webcam. So you simply go back here to the material, and under the base color you simply switch to no light, and now you can see all sides are showing the full color of my live input from my webcam, right? Of course, still this will probably destroy a little bit the 3D effect of that cube, right? But it's very, very important to know. Let's say if we use here now our just a simple rectangle, right? And we put it maybe 60 by 9. Let's make that 60 by 9. And let's bring that a bit down in the scaling, right? And let's also bring that here in front of us. So if we add here now a material, right? Maybe let's do that again, just that I can show it to you again. So I want to bring my live input from the webcam now on this rectangle. So I simply drag and drop a material, and I simply add a material stage. I use here the texture default, and under the loader I simply say I want to use a texture property, and that's here my live video, right? So now we are here. Now you can see already it looks a little bit washed out because we used the material node which is affected by light. So if we don't want to have that light effect on our rectangle, we simply go here to our lightning model and choose here no light, and as you can see now we have a very clear live image from my webcam with the real colors. Let's also talk about some more settings or properties under here our texture or texture property, right? So if we open up all that guys and this one and maybe also right click here, then you can see you have here a couple of different options, right? So you have basically access to all that yeah nodes, right? So as you know, that live video node is also a node itself, and here under that ordinal you basically can choose your video input, right? So I have now here my C922 Logitech webcam, but in the Ventuz configurator, you also can add many more inputs if you want. If you have a capture board, if you have a NDI input and things like that, you can assign that in the Ventuz configurator, and then you can choose it in your live input node, which live stream, live feed you want to show where, right? Then we also have here things like the sampler, right? So that sampler belongs a bit together to the mapping. So let's maybe start with the mapping first. Let me uh, make that a bit smaller. Video control we don't need. So let's talk here about that mapping first. By default, we don't have a lot of choice or properties what we can do. But let's say you want to move your texture, your live input, your movie, your image, whatever, on that rectangle, right? Via the UV coordinates basically, right? So then you simply go here to the mapping and you choose here from the 2D mapping to UV0. And now you can see already we have here a couple of more options like the position in X, right? And as you can see, I can move now my texture in X and Y. I can scale it, right? I can press it together. I scale it in the X and in the Y. I have a scaling factor all. I even can rotate it if I want it, right? So let's say for whatever reason you have to adjust, for example, the scaling of your movie, and not, you don't want to do that with the geometry, right? So if I make my geometry smaller, then you can see I get, yeah, squeezed together here, right? So I don't want to have that. But let's say you simply want to have that texture a bit smaller, that live input is a bit smaller here on that. So we go to the mapping to D, and we simply decrease here that scaling factor all. We make it a bit smaller, something like 0.75, whatever. And now let's see what the sampler is doing. So if we change here the sampler from simple to, or we choose simple and then we say simple clamp, yeah, that's basically the default, or we say simple wrap, right? So now you can see with the wrap, Ventus is basically repeating the texture in all directions, right? So if I go down here to my mapping and I make it even smaller, so you can see now I have, it's me over there many many times, right? So this is something where you also have to try and error, because you have really a couple of cool options. You even can animate that, guys, right? You also can go here again to the advanced, sorry, to the simple, and then we go again to the clamp. And let's see what else we can do here. Let's go maybe to the wrap again, so we don't have many options here. If we do here, then of course we have more, right? So if we do the clamp, then we can say, hey, wrap it or clamp it, or I want to have a black border, right? For example, I want to have a white border, I want to have a transparent border, and again, wrap it or clamp it, wrap U and clamp V, or the other way around, or mirror it, things like that, right? Or mirror it once. So as you can see, with these settings, you really can do sometimes some really cool, nice effects, right?